Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Words About Books. I am Ben. I am here with my co-host Nate, and we are going to be resuming our discussion on Agatha Christie's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. When we last left off, we went over all the suspects and where we stand on their levels of suspicion, and Detective Ben is going to give some deep insights into the case. So look forward to that. And if you haven't checked out our first episode, I think you really should in order to get the most out of this one. So please go back and check that out if you haven't. Otherwise, enjoy the show.
All right. Well, let's move on to another potential suspect. One of the townspeople also found that mystery man that bumped into Shepard. And the mystery man was asking where the house was, where Fernley Park was, because apparently he's just really bad at directions. He had to ask multiple people where the same giant estate was. Now, he had an American accent.
The fuck he did.
Supposedly.
Let's just say maybe he was talking a lot about hooky there with his American accent, eh?
And that leads him to conclude that the feather quill was used to sniff heroin, and this man brought the quill with him.
Wait, did you mention the heroin? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, he was sniffing heroin. So I wanted to mention, I had a little joke written here about how, to show off his intellect, Shepard's like, "Ah, yes, heroin, diamorphine hydrochloride." And I very wittily wrote that I think that's what President Trump was suggesting as a cure for COVID. You may continue.
Well, hey, by the time this one comes out, maybe we'll know if that's true. So Poirot brings up Ursula Bourne's weird story again, and she's also very handsome, Ben.
Dude, she's clearly screwing Patton. I don't know what you're looking for me. From the minute he said she was handsome, I knew, that's where he's going with it. Because Shepard says, and as I was leaving the house, I couldn't help but thinking what a handsome woman she was. Exceedingly handsome. Exactly Ralph's type. I've seen that boy go after many a blonde maid. They're definitely screwing.
Did he really say that?
He said everything up until the exceedingly handsome point, yeah. He said something like handsome, exceedingly handsome. He called special attention.
But did he call out man, that's Ralph's type right there?
No, but he said it in such a way, the questions he was
asking, was very obvious.
He was asking questions about Ralph and then immediately juxtaposed that with, she's a really good looking girl. And Ralph is a known womanizer who was womanizing with a woman the day of the murder.
Oh, wow. You put two and two together, didn't you?
I always do.
So Shepard reads his notes to Poirot. Ralph had to have come into the window because his boot prints were on the ground. Ralph was in financial troubles and so asked for money, and that was who Roger was talking to. However, Flora saw Roger after this, so Ralph could not have been the killer. They think that Parker may have been the blackmailer of Mrs. Ferrars. Maybe he was in cahoots with that American-Canadian stranger. Hey, Canada is part of the Americas, okay?
No one in Canada calls it America, and no one in America calls it America.
So the next several chapters are people coming forward or having their shit stories unraveled after Poirot told them that he was going to do exactly that. So we're going to go chapter by chapter, but we're going to take information from various sources and kind of clump it together so it's easier to listen to and follow. And we're going to hear from Detective Ben every step of the way. So are you ready to be a world-class detective?
What? I am a world-class detective. Among other things, I am also a world-class at, sir.
A gentle lover.
Not the least of which, and also a fantastic podcast host.
Okay. So I should probably say at this point, I know who the killer is. I knew ahead of time. That's why I'm not detectiving with you. So here we go. So we start with Mrs. Ackroyd. So she goes to see Dr. Shepard. She starts by throwing shade on Ursula Bourne, who's a spiteful, evil servant woman.
Oh, these servants these days, they just don't know how to properly serve, and they have all these ideas that they should be paid and not marry the man of the house. That's what I say. That's what my mother told me. I tell you.
So Mrs. Ackroyd, in between being just the worst, she has been hiding something. She's got a massive amount of bills that have been piling up over the last few months or maybe years. And she went to go check on Roger's will to see if he left her money, in case he suddenly and mysteriously died.
I could see that look in your eyes, Dr. Nate. You don't know what it's like to be a meth addict woman in this economy and time of depression and the vote, suffrage, and it's your fault. Yes, it's you.
It's not her fault that she had to go look at his will. It's Roger's fault for being a weird, secretive man about his money.
You know what's doubly weird is that she did look at his will, and she was still surprised she didn't get shit.
She didn't find the will, actually, because Ursula came in the room before she could find it in his desk. And so Mrs. Ackroyd does what she does best. Act like a spoiled, entitled asshole.
You won't get my voice, sea witch.
She tells her to go clean up some dust, and she makes up an excuse, and she leaves Bourne to talk with Roger alone. Shepard then has the idea that Mrs. Ackroyd left the silver table open, and she blushes, and she's like, yeah, well, my plan was to take a curio from there and get appraised in London and, come back and tell Roger how valuable it is. Yep, that's the story we're going with. She was going to just bring it back and tell Roger that it was worth a lot of money. And her story also sheds light that Ursula lied, which isn't surprising. Roger did not call her in to yell at her, but she in fact went to see him. But it doesn't matter because she was going to quit anyway. So, Detective Ben, what are your thoughts on Mrs. Ackroyd and Ursula right now?
Well, we could probably book her on a conspiracy to commit robbery and attempted robbery. And I'm guessing if we kept digging, probably a whole lot of things. She mentions vaguely that she's in debt because she had to buy things, lady things a man just wouldn't understand. And I'm going to be honest with you, man, unless she was buying gold-plated tampons, I don't know what the fuck that means.
I don't think a woman would understand that either.
I don't get it. So I don't know what she means. I don't know what she bought. I don't know who she bought it from, but they sound like the type of people that maybe break your legs if you don't pay on time. So, yeah, I'm guessing we can probably get her in jail for at least 5 years. But this firmly cemented my suspicions that Ursula was talking to Ackroyd about Ralph. And maybe Mrs. Patton, or not Mrs. Patton, Mrs. Ackroyd, just because that's obviously what Mrs. Ackroyd is afraid of. That
so she killed Roger to silence him?
No, I don't think she killed Roger Ackroyd.
Yeah, because she didn't get shit in the will. Really, she got some money, but
no,
it's gonna be gone by a couple months. At best.
They definitely had the blowout, but I don't. Never really considered her a serious suspect. But this did confirm for me that yes, Ursula and Roger, or oh my god, everybody's name is just bleeding together now.
There are a lot of R names.
Ursula and Ralph were doing the old horizontal Charleston, as the kids of this time and also Nate say.
Have you seen the Charleston? I would do that in the bedroom. Let's move on to Raymond, our next suspect. So he pleads guilty in the cheeriest of ways to having a secret. So he's in debt really bad as well. He got 500 pounds in the will, which puts him on his feet again with just a little bit left over to probably gamble and piss it all away like an idiot. So he's pretty much cleared from suspicion then and there by Dr. Shepard. But who gives a shit about what Dr. Shepard thinks? I want to hear from Detective Ben and what he thinks about Raymond.
Raymond's pretty goddamn fishy to me. I still he comes and he confesses this in such a way that he's like, okay, look, here's the thing. Yeah. Okay. I'm hiding something. Oh yeah, you're right. I'm hiding something. I'm in a little bit of debt and
It's no big deal. Everyone does it.
Yeah. I gambled on some horses. I lost. It was just a bad day. It happens to anyone.
And that's a lot of money, as we established, because he said 500 pounds gets him out of debt with a little left over. So that's like tens of thousands of dollars.
That's what, according to you, over $15,000?
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. So it happens, man. Okay, it happens. I lost. There were a couple races, more than one race. I lost more than one race. I'm at the track frequently. I went double or nothing with a guy to try to make it back. Who loses twice in a row? That's just, I mean, it was rigged.
So I decided to bet him again.
So I bet again.
Double or nothing again.
Couple more times.
Or nothing. No big deal, man. Everyone has an off day, and that horse's off day was that entire week.
Then the real bad thing was that I had actually then needed to borrow money from the guy I was gambling with to pay the other guy from last month that I was getting. Look, the point is, okay, I got $500, whatever. It's no big deal. Okay, it's not a big deal. Yeah, I benefited from him dying. I'm not gonna lie about that. I'm not lying. You can tell I'm not lying because my face is so sincere and cherubic. And so yeah, just that's my deal. Now you know my deal. You never need to look at me again. Okay, I'm gonna go bye Poirot. Stop looking at me like that, Poirot. Bye. I'm leaving. You can't say anything to me after this because I told you my truth. We're cool. Bye. Slams the door. Runs away. That's the tone with which he confessed.
Yeah.
So no.
So you're not buying it, huh?
No, I don't believe him. No.
All right. Well, now there's a quick interlude chapter dedicated to gossip and mahjong. I don't know shit about mahjong, so we're not going to talk about it. But a question arises. Who did the ring belong to, Detective Ben?
Shamefully, I must admit that I did not realize who the ring belonged to until the book told me, and I was so angry at myself that I hadn't figured it out because I was so close that I actually went like, oh, fuck. And I said that out loud from a dead 2-hour silence, and my wife nearly jumped off the couch.
So let's go to Parker then, the guy you believe to be Mrs. Ferrara's blackmailer. So they suspect that he is probably not the killer, but he might be the blackmailer, and those might be two different people. So Poirot believes him to be innocent, but they need to know the truth for sure. And he thinks that Parker was intentionally listening in to the conversations in Roger Ackroyd's study on purpose. And the reason he strongly suspects this, other than the fact that Parker is being shady as shit on the night of the death, was that his previous master was Major Ellerby. And Major Ellerby accidentally murdered a man in Bermuda, and Parker knew about it, and he took advantage of his master and blackmailed him until his master died of drug overdose. So it's not looking too good for Parker here. And Parker admits he heard blackmail being talked about by Roger, and he thought that someone was trying to blackmail Roger Ackroyd and wanted that sweet, sweet blackmail money. So, Detective Ben, you and Poirot seem to agree that he is a blackmailing piece of shit. Any other thoughts on Parker?
No, I mean, obviously, Poirot probably got that idea from me. He probably overheard me saying that because I also had obviously reached the same conclusions about Parker, including that Pirates of the Caribbean shit that I couldn't possibly have known about because it wasn't anywhere in the book. Only an idiot wouldn't have picked up on that information. That was one of the rare times that she did pull a bullshit. You couldn't possibly have known that.
Yeah, out of nowhere, he had another master who he's blackmailing for killing someone in Bermuda.
Yeah, he literally just pulls that out of nowhere. There's no clue other than Parker acts strange and was obviously listening. He was obviously eavesdropping. But yeah, this Bermuda crap, that's just like Poirot's just like, now tell me about that night in Peru. And like Poirot's just mind reading here at this point. So
let's move on to Charles Kent. Who is Charles Kent? Well, he's the weird guy who has the Canadian accent, who is passing as American, who is hiding his face on that night that Roger died. He was actually detained in Liverpool on suspicion of being an asshole, I guess. I don't know. I guess they put his face out. They put a description out. Like, guy who is Canadian but American.
Conspiracy to commit jitterbug.
Kind of a douche. So he's the mystery man that went to Fernley Park. He's also suspected of doing drugs off of goose quills because that's how cool people do it. And when Poirot goes to talk with him, with Dr. Shepard, he really doesn't say anything to them because I take it that he really likes being a suspect of murder. That's all I could figure out because he wasn't talking and he's in a foreign country. It's like, all right, like you can just sit in jail forever. Now, he was seen at the bar later that night with a lot of money on him. Possibly 40 pounds in stolen money, ? Which is like, again, $3,300 or so. They seem to think he was at the bar at the same time that the murder happened. And the inspector's like, well, let's let him go. And Poirot's like, oh, hold on. Just keep him in jail a little longer because, like,
also, this airtight time of death we have is based on this, testimony of two of the suspects.
Yeah, exactly. Like, hold off on that. So, Detective Ben, did you ever suspect this guy? And also, on another note, why is he such an asshole? Is it because Agatha Christie hates Americans and thinks that they're all like Canadians? And also, does she not know that we Americans single-handedly won World War II by coming in the last couple months and saving the day?
Well, she doesn't because World War II hasn't happened yet.
Okay. I'll impose World War I over.
Okay. So, yeah, to answer your first question, I don't suspect him at all. I didn't know he existed until 5 minutes ago, and that would have been a solution to the crime unworthy of Miss Christie's talents to have some off-screen Canadian hoodlum murder our boy. To be quite frank, Canadians are pretty much harmless. We can rule them out of most crimes of passion. I'm surprised he was even carrying heroin and not a bag of milk, considering how painfully Canadian this man actually was. With that being said, he's also actually a British citizen. He was born in Britain. He just spent a lot of time in Canada. So,
well, yes, they do draw attention to his last name of Kent.
Yes, and because I have also read Game of Thrones, I know that when you are from a place and your name is that place, you either founded it or you're a bastard.
So you think that Charles Kent is perhaps a duke, and he founded the county of Kent?
Yeah. Carrying goose quills full of heroin. So.
That sounds like a duke.
I was gonna make a joke about how that sounds like a duke, but like I thought about it and I was like, maybe it does actually. Like that's either the trashiest thing or the ritziest thing. I don't know what a goose, like how much heroin can you fit in a goose quill?
Let's Google
yeah,
that.
You Google that.
I'm on a government list now.
But yeah, I didn't suspect him, but I will admit I don't wholly know what the hell he was doing there that night.
All right, let's get to your primary suspect. And actually, I'll lump her together with Major Blunt. So Flora, prior to this, Poirot has Parker and Flora recreate the scene of Flora exiting Roger's room. So Parker walks in and Flora has her hand on the handle. So initially, Poirot makes it sound like it's some sort of experiment to see if Major Blunt could hear them outside. But really, he was seeing if Parker saw Flora come out of the room or if she merely had her hand on the handle. So he concludes she never went into the room. She went upstairs to steal the 40 pounds. And then when she heard Parker coming into the hall, she hastily put her hand on the door and pretended to have just come out of the room so as not to arouse suspicion. So when the police were here and they told her that they were investigating a burglary, she thought that they were there for her. And so she stuck to her original story. That way, they wouldn't get her. And then it turns out he was murdered. So she admits she's a fraud and she needed the money really badly and nobody else could understand why. And my question, Detective Ben, is if Roger died and she was almost certainly going to get some money in the will, why would she not just go put the fucking money back? The 40 pounds. Did she blow that 40 pounds in between the night that she took it and the following day?
So again, in my initial read, I didn't understand how much money that was. So it seemed entirely possible she did blow that much money. Like you could spend 40 pounds buying, the Witcher 3. Like well, first off, it sounds like she may also owe the kind of money that, she probably did spend 40 pounds. She probably spent that 40 pounds long before she took it. Also, there's this distinct possibility that she's also not a very good person, and I'm not giving you back $3,000. I already got away with taking it. So,
and she does just get away with it. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, so that's the other thing I wanted to point out is that, we got Kent up there in Liverpool sitting in jail, right? He didn't kill anyone because, the man's Canadian as he is British. If he'd done it, he'd have apologized for it already. With that said, my prime suspect, Flora, unfortunately, seems to be cleared of murder. I'm not thrilled about it. Again, she was my prime suspect. But she is still, on the plus side, guilty of grand larceny, making false statements to the police, obstructing an investigation, and quite possibly accessory after the fact to murder. So with good behavior, she will probably be out in less than 10 years, and she'll have a good 5 years left before her boyfriend dies of old age. Who, by the way, her boyfriend also broke his shit. And I don't know if I've mentioned this, but his hobbies don't age very well.
So Major Blunt, he's got nothing to hide except for his feelings. And he's really bad at hiding those. And Poirot says that Flora has a thing for Blunt, which everyone in the world could see except for him. And he tells Blunt to go to her. And they later get engaged. And by later, I mean like the next day.
Well, Monsieur Poirot, I'm just a simple hunter of one of nature's most sensitive and intelligent animals, the elephant. But goddamn it, if I don't love that girl, I'm gonna have to go up there right now, propose marriage to her. I don't care how much debt she's in. I don't care. We'll go live in the bush. We'll eat endangered lion meat.
Oh man. Captain Colonialism is in for a rude awakening in the next decade. Oh, man. So let's go on to Miss Russell, then, who you don't really suspect at all.
No.
So earlier in the tale, Poirot learns that she saw Dr. Shepard. And Poirot deduces that the reason she saw him was for a reference to cocaine addiction because it was in an article in a paper that was recently run. And I gotta tell you, were they really concerned about cocaine addiction if you can get Veronal and all sorts of shit just off the shelf? I'm not buying it.
No, see, this is where you and I differ. And we're going to get into a very heated political argument that we're going to have to cut about why I think all drugs should be legalized and how I think the war on drugs was a mistake.
Fair enough. Moving on. Now, Poirot tells her, Miss Russell, that Charles Kent was arrested, but he has an alibi. So, things are going great. Oh, but also his alibi is no longer valid because, he was in the bar at the time that Roger Ackroyd was supposedly killed, but Flora just basically stated that she lied, and Roger Ackroyd was killed sooner than that. And so Charles Kent is now a huge suspect, and he's going to get fucked unless she comes clean. And so she breaks down. She says he did not go to the study and that Kent is her bastard child. She met him in the summer house for like the first time in his life, basically. And that explains the cambric and the quill that was in the summer house. And she ran out there to leave him a message to wait until a certain time. That explains why she was running. And she ran into Dr. Shepard. She was out of breath.
I also didn't know what cambric was.
Yeah, neither did I. And I didn't want to say that until I was certain you didn't know.
No, I
so
had no fucking clue.
I had to look that up. It's like a part of a maid's uniform.
The old cambric and quill. It's going to be the name of my next D&D.
I don't know how it fell off.
Well, apparently you just starch the shit out of it until that stuff snaps like Lego.
Like dry spaghetti?
Yeah.
So he couldn't have killed Roger Ackroyd because she was busy meeting him in the summer house to give him money that will totally make up for the years of not being there, and he totally won't blow on drugs. So she gives him a solid alibi, if she's to be trusted, and attests that he could not have been the murderer.
Look, I believe her. She's the only person in this story that's not broke. Like, she's the only person in this story that doesn't owe bookies and drug dealers thousands of dollars. And again, the time of death, like, I don't even trust that.
That's good, because it's already been proven to be false once.
But as you rightfully point out, I am running out of suspects, and I get the secretary did it. He hasn't had his own chapter yet, so,
and he's not gonna.
Yeah, I was trying to metagame it, and I figured like it was going to be like I actually ruined my mom's big into mysteries and everything, and I ruined murder documentaries for her one time because she would always try to figure out who did it, and I would always guess it. And she was like, "How did you know?" And I was like, "It's always the one person they keep mentioning who they're not interviewing because they're in jail."
Which would be Raymond. Yeah, because they're in jail.
So that's why I was like,
Raymond here.
Yeah, he doesn't have his own chapter. We're not going to find out what he was doing that night because he was murdering him.
So that just leaves Ursula Bourne. So Ursula comes crying to Poirot. She read an article in the paper that Ralph was arrested in Cranchester, which is total bullshit. Poirot just had it put in there because he knew it might trigger this reaction from her. So she says she's not going to hide anything now because it doesn't matter because he's been arrested. So she spills the beans that her sister was married to Captain Folliot? Folliot? Whatever. Captain Weird Name, who isn't important to the story anyway. And that was Ursula's previous employer, which is why her previous employer was so fucking weird when asked about it.
No,
that was her sister.
That doesn't explain anything. That does not explain that reaction.
You're right. She was nervous that they would find out that they were related, but that's dumb.
Yeah, why would that matter?
She freaked the fuck out.
Yeah, that's one of the most bad. Like that was kind of an ass pull. Like she was kind of like, the only reason she reacted that way was to make you think Ursula was like more mysterious than she was.
Do you think that Ursula's sister is the murderer?
No. She might be bipolar.
Well, just give some Veronal. That'll clear that right up. So Ursula secretly married Ralph, but they didn't want to drop that because then Ralph would be written out of the will. So if Roger found out they had married, they'd be fucked financially. But when it was announced that Flora and Ralph were engaged, Ursula was pissed. So she was the woman that Caroline heard talking in the woods with Ralph. Ralph was trying to get her to go along with it, and Ursula was like, fuck this, I'm telling him what's going on. And so she did, and she got yelled at by Mr. Ackroyd, and she kept this information secret because it made Ralph look way worse. Like he would kill his adopted father before he could be removed from the will. So that's who the ring belonged to. That was Ursula's ring. And Detective Ben, tell us how it feels to be a detective that isn't nearly as good as Poirot.
I have shaved my own mustache in shame. I guess that really says more about my morals than anyone else's, that I figured out that they were together, and it never even occurred to me that they had gotten married or that he had proposed marriage. That's why I was so angry, because I figured out basically the whole thing, except that he'd given her a ring. Which, I was so stupid. Yeah, that was really dumb. The other funny thing is, like, when Ralph is like, babe, we can't tell him, we'd be ruined financially, and she's like, Ralph, get a job. It's not that bad. He's like, nah. These aren't working man's hands. Like that's the sad thing, is like people literally thought he would kill his own father rather than get a job. That is how much the people of this small English hamlet fear work.
Yeah, everyone talks about Ralph very positively. Like, oh, he's such a good boy.
I guess by the standards of his household, he's not the worst.
That's very true.
like, I guess he's not massively in debt. He's just broke. Like, he just lives at his allowance, which is pathetic for a grown man. But yeah, that's the whole thing. It's like, nah, babe, we just gotta pretend I'm marrying my cousin for a few more months until my not dad dies. And it's like, he's not sick, Ralph. It's not.
It's gonna be years.
It's not going away, you idiot. Like, he's like, no, we just need to stay engaged like long enough to pretend we had a fight. I think he'd buy that. And she's like,
he did not have any sort of long game.
She's like, you're fucking 30, Ralph. like, you can't be doing this, Ralph.
Ralph, you're a captain, right? Like,
is he a captain?
They keep calling him captain. Oh man. Okay, let's go through the home stretch.
Like, is he a captain? Like Captain Jack's a captain?
Captain Crunch. So Poirot does the classic detective story trope where he gathers all of the likely suspects and has them meet in one room.
He is a captain.
So, yeah.
I don't know what of.
Yeah, I don't know either. I thought of the military, but
either way, he's got a job then.
I
get a house, you lazy fuck. Good Lord. These people.
So Poirot invites Raymond, Parker, the two Ackroyd females, Major Blunt, Ursula, and Miss Russell, as well as Dr. Shepard.
It's a very clinical way to the Ackroyd females.
The Ackroyd ladies? What the fuck do you want from
me? Ackroyd females sounds like a WNBA team.
Would you watch it?
The WNBA team?
Yes.
I guess, yeah. Nothing else is on. There's no other sports right now, so.
So Poirot lays out all of the facts that we've just gone over, as well as one other new piece of evidence. He is suspicious of the conversation that Major Blunt thought he heard, Major Blunt initially thought it was to Raymond, like I said. But Raymond denied that, and Poirot thought that the what was it? The calls on my purse had been so frequent of late was something that you say to a scribe. And that's why Major Blunt thought he was talking to Raymond. And Poirot believes that Mr. Ackroyd actually did buy that dictaphone after all, and he was going to surprise Raymond with it. Although, wouldn't that be like, surprise, we're replacing you?
Surprise, you've been automated.
Yeah.
No, I think maybe...
I think Raymond would just listen to the recording.
First off, you're talking to a man who has 5 fucking maids who live in his house full time. I'm sure he can justify keeping a secretary and a dictaphone.
Fair enough. So Poirot, so that would mean that no one was in that room with Mr. Ackroyd. Now, next, Poirot surprises everyone by bringing in Ralph. He found him. Yes, Dr. Shepard had gone to Ralph that night after learning that Roger was dead and knew Ralph would be the prime suspect, so he hid him in a nearby nursing home in a nearby town to protect him. And Poirot, he fakes having a dementia-ridden nephew in order to get information out of Caroline to figure out where Ralph might have been sent. And sure enough, a guy was taken around that time under an alias, but Poirot recognized him as Ralph. And Ralph admits that he's innocent, but has no alibi. And everyone in the room believes in him, but he's kind of fucked unless the real killer is found, because all the evidence points to him. And finally, Poirot gets a telegraph from a steamer ship that he secretly reads and doesn't tell anyone. And he said that is the last piece of evidence that he needs to name the killer. And I thought he was going to name them right then and there, but instead he says, I'm going to the police tomorrow with the name unless you fess up this evening.
This story started with a stupid twist of somebody not saying the thing that would be really helpful to say because it sounds like something you might take to your grave with you, and it's going to end with that, God damn it.
Yeah, but it does not end with a knife in Poirot's neck, even though I'm surprised that there was no fight. So, all right, Detective Ben, everything's in lean after this moment. The telegraph, Ralph Patton's crappy alibi, the dictaphone, all of it. So you tell me, what was the telegraph and who done it?
I've carefully analyzed all the evidence. I've gone over every clue and every witness statement. Everyone in this room is a liar. Most of them are thieves. But it would appear that none are killers. Now, you see, like Poirot, I've done some digging outside of the text myself, and I have secret information of my own. It turns out that we're not actually in a mystery novel at all. We're in Agatha Christie's one and only horror novel. You see, Roger Ackroyd did, in fact, kill himself. Well, if one who is possessed by Lucifer himself could be said to have committed suicide, you see, it was actually Ackroyd all along, fucking all of it. But no one, not even Ackroyd, knew. It all started one fateful night around a pitiful campfire in the Himalayas. Ackroyd's team had frozen to death one by one until only he was left. Roasting the leather of his shoelaces over the fire in a last-ditch effort to put off starvation for one more day, Ackroyd cried out in desperation, and none other than the Dark Prince of Hell was there to answer him. Ackroyd survived that expedition, but when he returned, he began to notice large chunks of time missing, also money for some reason. And it was the Morning Star-possessed Ackroyd himself who came to face Widow What's-Her-Name in the night to demand blackmail. And it was he who drove her to suicide. You see, my children, it was the Widow Whoosits that found out. But she had not the heart to tell him that it was her own loving suitor who had driven her to the brink. so she opted instead to leave a note explaining the situation. And in the moment of sheer madness that followed his reading of the note, Roger Ackroyd knew what he must do. He took the sacred silver dagger of Megiddo and plunged it into his own neck, though Satan attempted to resist. And in the struggle, he broke his elbow, and that's the weird angle. That's what happened.
So you don't know.
And
is what you're telling me.
Ackroyd brought
spent
the
this entire time telling us you have no fucking clue.
reign to an end, and also tragically his own life. What else can I say? The real criminal here is Satan, and no one's to blame, and the case is closed. Now, Flora, you're still going to jail for that robbery. So,
and Mrs. Ackroyd.
Yeah, Mrs. Ackroyd, I just don't like you. I'll find something. So, come on.
All right. Well, let's see what Poirot thinks. So he dismisses everyone except Dr. Shepard so they can discuss the case. He goes through step by step.
Oh, me too? I gotta go?
No, you have to stay.
Shit.
You have to listen.
Oh, I don't even know why. I just solved it. I mean, did you see that? I guess he wants to give me an award.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. You're the detective. That's why. So he believes that the call was placed by an accomplice. So it couldn't be Ralph Patton because that would just be weird and absurd. So the motive for the call had to be so that the murder could be discovered that night. And the chair, which we'd all forgotten about, was drawn out in order to hide a little table in the room from the sight of the door or window. He thinks the object on the table was the dictaphone, and he believes that it was removed from the scene after the body had been discovered by everyone. He also suspects that the voice we heard during that time that Major Blunt heard it was not Roger talking to the dictaphone, but rather the dictaphone being played with his voice to make it sound like he was still alive. He suspects that the shoe prints were deliberately put there to throw suspicion onto Ralph, and he recaps who could have done all this and who had the opportunity to get the dagger and who could bring a bag to take the dictaphone away. And he says it's Dr. Shepard himself. What do you think of that, Detective Ben?
Fuck. That's really smart.
So Shepard tries to say it's not him, but gets shut down. The money that Dr. Shepard came into that I forgot to mention in this podcast was explained away as inheritance, but no such inheritance was found by Poirot
or Poirot
or Coilrow. So Poirot said that was the blackmail money from Mrs. Ferrars. And the telegraph he read from the American steamliner was some guy who saw Dr. Shepard that morning. That's why Poirot was so interested in who saw him. It wasn't about Miss Russell. It was about this other guy. He's an American, and he was instructed by Dr. Shepard to call him and reply, no answer.
Okay, well, no.
So the call was genuine, but Shepard lied and said it was Parker.
He was instructed to call Dr. Shepard, and when Dr. Shepard answered, Dr. Shepard didn't answer. He said no reply.
Okay.
So he didn't call Dr. Shepard and say, no reply, and then hang up.
Why not? Ben. And so Poirot, he admires Caroline, and he wants to give Dr. Shepard an out.
Poirot was not lying. He's going to the police tomorrow. And I just want to tell you what a stone cold fucking bastard Poirot is. This is awesome. He goes, I like your sister. And out of respect, I'm going to the police tomorrow. But I'll give you one chance to maybe take another way out. Maybe poison. Maybe a small overdose by accident. Basically, Poirot literally tells this dude, kill yourself.
Yeah,
he looks at him dead in the face and he says, kill yourself. And he means it. And it's so fucking intense and cool and like badass. And he's like, oh, and don't think about trying that knife shit on me. Such tricks don't work on Hercule Poirot. And I was just like, God damn, he's such a badass. I was so into it. I loved that ending. I was just like, my jaw dropped. I was like, I texted Nate when I started reading this. I was like, I suspect everyone. And then I texted Nate when I finished reading this, and I was like, I didn't suspect enough people.
Yeah.
It was so brilliant.
I knew what had happened because in the book, obviously I knew who killed him, but I didn't know how. Like, because the timing didn't add up at first. I was like, that's really weird because he writes down from his perspective. I turned to look and see if there's anything I had left undone, and I concluded I had not. And I'm like, okay, that's where he kills him. Because before that in the book, she doesn't type out every single bit of dialogue or every single thing. She glazes over small periods of time because they're not important, right?
We can't possibly do a story this like detailed and intricate justice in a summary. We tried to cover the broad strokes and
right,
but we can't. You have to read it, but it's totally possible to solve at a certain point. It plays so much with the traditional conceit of most mystery novels that like Sherlock Holmes are always written by Watson and Dupin's stories were written by his assistant. It's always this brilliant guy who has an assistant that admires them and the assistant writes the stories and submits it to the paper, and it's kind of the framing device that lets you pretend it's all plausibly real. And so of course Dr. Shepard is that framing device this time. But there are multiple times in the story that it is called attention that the story we are reading is like a mixture of notes and journal entries written by Shepard. And at one point, Poirot asks, he says like, oh, my old friend Hastings, he used to write down all my adventures, and it was very helpful because sometimes he recorded something I missed and blah, blah, blah. And Shepard goes, well, actually, I'm a little embarrassed, but I've kind of been writing them down too. I mean, how often do you get to work with Poirot? I thought I might publish it. And Poirot's like, oh, my good friend, would you please let me see your writing? And Poirot reads the manuscript, which is what becomes the book we're reading. And Poirot says when he hands the manuscript back to Shepard, you've been very reticent about your own contributions to this story, Dr. Shepard. Like you haven't. He tells us that Shepard is leaving stuff out, and he plays it off like, oh, you're being humble, like you've actually been smarter or wittier or contributing more to the investigation than you let on. But what he means is you skipped the part where you killed the guy. And Poirot has known like almost the whole time. And there's just, I loved that detail. Like at that point, that was the final clue you needed when Poirot tells you you're reading a story by an unreliable narrator. That was when you should have known to suspect the narrator as well.
And most people probably don't because it's very well written and it plays on that trope.
Yeah, detective novels hardwire you to not think about that. And there's no reason we shouldn't have thought about it. Like Agatha Christie is just like, it's such a great point to make about how we let ourselves get boxed into certain ways of thinking, and that totally blinds us to the possibilities like this. Because Poirot tells him also, like at the end, he's like, you should kill yourself, but before you do, you should finish that book and maybe be a little he goes, you should finish that book and maybe be a little more honest about your own contributions to the case. And I was like, oh god, that's so fucking cool. Like I loved it. And like I said, we can't, there's so many,
read this book.
There's so many little clues I keep thinking of that we can't include them in a summary like this because they're buried, like the important clues are buried within clues about the multiple other crimes that are going on and all these interweaving stories and lives. And if we were to like call out every important clue, yeah, it's very easy to solve. But she buries it in what really feels like a real life situation. And it's just, she's so smart. Like I was really surprised that I'd put off reading Agatha Christie books for a long time, partly because my mom is a huge Agatha Christie fan and she's kind of talked my ear off about it for a long time. So I was just like, I didn't want to dive into it, but I finally did. And like the first thing I did when I finished this story was I called my mom and I was like, oh my God, you were so right about Agatha Christie. This was like, I got to read more of her stuff. Like this was this was a big eye opener for me.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite book that we've read so far.
I would agree. This is the most. This is the one book where I would say it is exactly the right length.
Absolutely.
What she did with 300 pages just blows my mind. I mean, the writing is just so tight. Everything is solvable. The clues are all there. It's still really fun. Like you, even if you know the ending going in.
Yeah, I still couldn't get everything. Even though I knew who the killer was, it still threw me off a bit because I thought, oh, he killed him at this point. But then other stuff came up that made me question, like, oh, did he like go back? Or I honestly thought that Charles Kent was made up. I thought he was just like, okay, I need to explain there's like a weird shady guy that doesn't really exist who went and killed Roger Ackroyd, but it was really me.
At a certain point, it's revealed that Shepard likes to tinker with, I guess I wanted to say electronics, but it's not really electronics at this day and age. But
mechanics.
Yeah, he likes to play with like little devices, and he has like a little workshop. And I thought that's a really weird thing to reveal about him at this point in the book, but I didn't know anything about Agatha Christie's other books. I thought like maybe Shepard was in a few more, and that was like something she was setting up for a later story. But it's like, no, he had the knowledge to rig that dictaphone to go off at a certain time and cover his tracks. And the only thing I like, because obviously I do a podcast like this, you guys have all heard me do it. I like to call out stupid plot holes and logical inconsistencies in books, and sometimes it's just nitpicky garbage. I tried, and the only thing I can come up with in this book that kind of doesn't make sense, though we will touch on one thing here coming up, is Shepard's plan sucks. Like, Shepard's plan is, because he kind of does plan it. We didn't really give the full reveal.
Yeah, he thought as soon as Mrs. Ferrars died that, like, okay, the jig is up and Mr. Ackroyd knows, and so he's got to go.
Yeah, and so
he'll come after me.
He stole Ralph Patton's boots when he went to visit him. He comes back with them, and that's what he uses to forge the footprints. We didn't really get into that. And also, when he goes there, he brings in his medical bag, which, again, I have no idea what a dictaphone looks like. I assume it can fit in a medical bag, so because it's smaller than I would have imagined. But he brings it in the medical bag, and he kills Ackroyd, and then he sets it up, and he leaves. He sets it up to go off after he's left so that somebody will hear Ackroyd speaking and assume he's still alive. And then he arranges for the American guy to call him so that he can pretend somebody called him and told him that Ackroyd was dead, which gives him an excuse to be the one to discover the crime scene and remove said dictaphone. But the giant flaw in his plan was that there were like 20 fucking people in that house, and any one of them could have gone into that room at any time while he was gone.
Right. And, oh, yeah, you're dead now, so it's got to be Dr. Shepard.
Yeah.
A better plan would be, let's frame Ralph, and then, like, let's get him. Like, don't hide him.
I don't know that he even wanted to, like, there's just so many good little human nature things.
But I can buy the fact that Dr. Shepard is a shitty murderer.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, that's the most nitpicky thing I can get, is that the criminal had a shitty plan. And they all do. Like, right. If you get caught, you had a shitty plan. Like, most criminals commit stupid crimes. So, yeah, it was totally plausible. I totally see why she won that contest. There's, now that we're at the end, there's so many things I could go back and call out as just like great examples of foreshadowing and character building. And
oh yeah, you can reread this and pick up a lot. I think I got some of that because I knew who it was, so I was picking out stuff, and I still didn't get all of it.
Well, and it's so plausible too. Like, you would think, how does she overcome the challenge of writing? Because when I realized Shepard did it, I was like, how is she going to overcome the challenge of like the first person nature of this narrative? And the idea that Poirot basically just coerces him into like, look, finish your book. It's going to be the last thing you ever do. And Shepard's character is just such that, yeah, he would do that. And there's just so many little hints about Shepard's character maybe not being the great guy he's trying to portray himself as, that Shepard lets slip through. And they're just little things other people say that he writes down, not even thinking about it. And it's such a clue. It's like reading somebody's diary and learning things about themselves that they didn't know. It's like we get to play Shepard's like therapist here.
Hey, that's why journaling is used in psychotherapy.
And it's so brilliant. And I can't emphasize enough, like, because we are going to do H.P. Lovecraft here coming up at a certain point, and I can't wait to show you the contrast of like a first person narrative done horribly wrong. Like so many of his stories are first person narratives, and the first person narrative makes it really creepy and really fun. But the problem with the first person narrative is, how do you end it? You know, it's like you always say, they're writing the book, we know they got out of it. And so H.P.
it's the joke from Monty Python where he just goes, at the end.
That's what it is. Like with H.P. Lovecraft, it's like, oh God, they're at the door now. I hear them knocking. I'm going to be dead.
That's like, that shows up in a lot of horror things. I'm like, why are you still writing this?
Yeah, it's like, totally implausible.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
But Christie, she gets past that. There is one weak bit at the end. And I think now I've gushed enough, so now maybe we should talk about like the very end of the book.
So yeah, Dr. Shepard, he writes the end where he's like, I never outright lied. I just really stretched the truth and kind of glossed over some things. Like that sentence where he talks about I looked around to see if there's anything I had left undone, and I realized there was not. That's where he killed the guy, but that's all he wrote about it. The thing is, Poirot, he tells Shepard like he tells Shepard like, yeah, kill yourself to spare your sister to having to find out that you're the killer. So
well, no, that's not what Poirot says. Poirot just says kill yourself because you can either go to jail, you put Caroline through this trial, or you can kill yourself. You can take the other way out. The easy way
I thought
out.
The whole point was
no,
he would not go to the police.
No, he's going to the police. He said it and he means it. Poirot does what he says.
I thought he would not go to the police if he wrote basically, I did it, here's how I did it.
No, Poirot
and sent it off to Reglan.
Poirot is going to the police. So I guess we there's some debate about this. I took that as Poirot said, tomorrow I go to the police. And up until this point, if Poirot says he's doing something, he's doing it. If he says tomorrow I'm going to the police, tomorrow he's going to the police. And Shepard, in his last writing, says something about, I don't want Caroline to find out. Well, I trust Poirot to protect her from the truth. He and Raglan will figure out something. But he says he and Raglan will figure out something. So Poirot's going to tell the inspector. But there's just no, like, Shepard thinks they're going to be able to hide it from Caroline. But no, I think Poirot has every intention of exposing what happened. And by Shepard killing himself, he just spares Caroline the embarrassment of a trial.
I don't know. He says, truth goes to Inspector Raglan in the morning, but for the sake of your good sister, I'm willing to give you the chance of another way out. Okay. Well, that would have been stupid.
I could see how you take it that way. I took it a different way.
Well, your way makes more sense because she would have found out.
But
she would have asked one of them, like, okay, so who is the murderer? I need to know. And they'll be like, I don't know. He didn't tell us. But also your brother's dead. But
I know why you took it that way, because then Shepard in his writing says like, oh, I hope Caroline doesn't find out. She's always been fond of me. She's absolutely gonna find out, you fucking idiot.
Yeah. It looks weird that you overdosed on Veronal and died. She thought that Mrs. Ferrars killed herself out of guilt. She's gonna think the same thing out of you. And what would you have been guilty of? Well, there's a dead guy that you saw. Oh, 2 and 2 together.
Yeah.
No one's on trial for Roger Ackroyd's murder because the murderer is already dead.
Well, and the other thing too is they've already involved like half a dozen police departments. There was a nationwide search for Ralph Patton. They arrested Charles Kent on suspicion of the Ackroyd murder in Liverpool. Like so many, this doesn't just go away.
Yeah, they just killed the two wealthiest people in town.
Yeah. Oh, believe me, I could imagine the entire Ackroyd family would be totally cool with like, yeah, no, nothing happened. Yeah, you know what? Live and let live. That's what I say.
Hey, his death solved a lot of problems.
Yeah. But no, I think the nation.
I'm rich and I don't have to marry my cousin. Great.
God, that is speaking of things that didn't age well. Good Lord. There's a lot of if you ever find yourself saying it's technically not incest, it's too close. Nope, it is. Don't do it.
All right. You want to do closing thoughts?
I've kind of given my closing thoughts.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we've already done closing thoughts. So why don't you tell all of the listeners what we're going to be reading next time?
Okay, so next time we are going to be reading Sorcery by Terry Pratchett. It is the third entry in his Discworld series, and I've been told it's a good place to start. I've read other Discworld novels, but Nate hasn't.
You showed me a very complicated graph that says start here.
Yes.
Pointing to Sorcery.
Yes. So I haven't read Sorcery. I'm interested to see if it's a good entry point. I believe it's where Terry Pratchett recommended starting. If you don't know, Terry Pratchett was a very famous author, one of the most beloved authors of the last 50 years or so, and he died not too many years ago. And I've actually recommended his books before on this podcast. So we're going to finally have Nate dive into Terry Pratchett, and I'm really interested to know what you think about this, because I suspect it's kind of like Monty Python in that you're either going to love it or hate it. I don't think anybody just kind of likes Discworld.
I better love it. Well, with that in mind, we'll see everyone in 2 weeks. Read the book.
Bye.
All right, hold on. Let me see here.
There goes the mic.
Yeah, that was my bad. I dinged the side of it.